I need to get through this review, so we're going to get through this review. It is 12:30 in the morning. It's gonna be done because it's gotta get done. The book is Vanishing Girls by Lauren Oliver, and I distinctly remember when I realized I probably didn't have the most refined taste in reading, when I definitely was not a literary fiction girl. I had been in Chicago at the time at a writer's conference. I had met somebody who was like, yeah, I can totally give you some pointers, some help. If you need, I can look things over for you. I reached out to him when it came to writing a paper on a novel. He definitely wrote back and said, I really can't help you because I've never heard of this book. Maybe that's why I couldn't get into any graduate programs, because I wasn't reading the kind of material that they wanted me to be dissecting. Whatever. No use crying over spilled milk. I still think this is a mighty impressive novel. If you have not read this novel, I'm going to try to keep the spoilers to the end because honestly, flabbergasted. This novel succeeds basically due to ambiguous language and misdirection. But you don't even know it. You do not know it until the end. A lot of these books that I'm rereading, I have completely forgotten what happens. I have vague recollections of what's going on. This one, I absolutely remembered nothing. I remembered two things. I remembered the twist, and I remembered that the main character worked at an amusement park. It was almost too bad that I remembered the twist, because there were moments when I would find myself getting annoyed because I was like, don't you get it? That's not real. I'm very impressed by Oliver. I didn't love it as much as I remembered loving it. The writing I thought was still impressive, but I think me loving the subject matter, the material, just came from being a different age, and I kind of wanted a little bit more. I felt like something that one of the characters got into and was kind of the driving force behind certain events needed a little bit more development. It was very bare bones. And even when I was rereading to write my notes here, I was just like, okay, so I didn't miss an explanation as to why these things, or what is going on with this situation. There's literally nothing about it that truly explains what these girls were getting into until kind of like a note to the editor at the end of the novel. But this book, I mean, if you have read Vanishing Girls, I want you to tell me when you figured out the twist, if you figured out the twist. This was way before my brain started working overtime and I started dissecting books as I read them. Ignore me. I don't even know what I want to say. I hardly ever know what I want to say these days, and yeah, we're not even going to try. We're just going to dive into it. Our main character is this girl named Nicole Warren, although everybody calls her Nick, and I will just pause to say, listening, I liked the narrator. She's actually one of my favorite narrators. I think she does a great job. But listening to it, I couldn't quite figure out at first if Nick was male or female, but I was like, Nick and Dara. Are Nick and Dara brother and sister? Are Nick and Dara friends? Are Nick and Dara together? Context clues, things, quickly you realize that Nick is a female, and she and her younger sister Dara are best friends. We open sort of in many places. This book has different levels of media in which it portrays the story. We've got blog posts, we have narration, we have journal entries, newspaper articles. So there's all kinds of ways in which we're getting information to build the story. So the very first opening is Nick and Dara are at a party. Dara, I don't really like Dara. I don't know if we're supposed to like Dara, but at this party, she declares that Nick is her best friend. But they've had some kind of separation that has divided them from being like sisters and best friends to just sisters who barely tolerate each other. And so I wasn't sure if I was supposed to like Dara. She's grittier than I personally am. And so for that alone, I don't connect as readily. Even then, I couldn't quite find any positive characteristics to glom onto with her. There's definite jealousy between the two girls, and it seems that her jealousy of Nick has pushed her onto this opposite path, so that Nick is the good girl, she's the screw up. So she's at this party just drinking and doing things that maybe Nick wouldn't do. I mean, honestly, I don't really like Nick either. I thought Nick was kind of boring. I understand. In the end, it was fascinating. But getting there and being in Nick's head, I was aggravated, I guess, by her lack of motivation and a lack of engagement with her own self and her own story. But we open at the party, and then we jump into some news report about how the police had a busy night because not only did they catch some teenage boys doing some stuff they shouldn't be doing, but there were some skinny dippers. Nick is one of the skinny dippers. Her parents had divorced sometime in the recent past, and she had been living with her dad, and now she's gonna go and live with her mom. She and Dara had gotten into a car accident. They kind of lost touch to some extent. Dara had been gravely injured. For some reason, they weren't really around each other. So now she's coming back to live with her mom, and this is also where Dara is. The two girls are like ships passing in the night. Nick in particular doesn't really know how to go about engaging with Dara. And then when we have Dara's perspective, Dara seems to just be kind of bitter towards Nick. The wedge that came between them is Nick had a best friend named John Parker, or Parker. Dara, in many ways, was the third wheel. She was that third point to the triangle, but it was kind of those two and then Dara. At some point, Parker and Dara started to date, and this had an effect on his friendship with Nick. So you don't quite know why. You don't know if it is because they liked each other. You don't know if it's just because the nature of him having somebody else to spend his time with. You don't know if it's like she just disapproves of her sister and her best friend dating. We're here and we're seeing that Nick doesn't know how to engage with Dara, even though she wants to engage with Dara. Every time that she makes an overture, she just misses Dara, and Dara never responds. But the one thing that the mother does want her to do is get a job, and apparently her job at the bowling alley is not sufficient. She ends up getting a job at the local amusement park called Fantasyland, or Fanland. There is a little unnecessary detail. It's necessary, but it's unnecessary. How somebody had died at this theme park some years earlier, and so the dad continues to come around, particularly every year on the anniversary of the daughter's death. That ride, the gateway, has been closed ever since. However, the current owner wants to get it up and running. She starts there only to learn that Parker also works there. Underneath all of this, we also have another subplot about this young girl named Madeline Snow who has gone missing. So sprinkled throughout this novel, we see clips of efforts to find her and how to be engaged. The story is that her parents had to go out of town suddenly because their grandmother was sick. Madeline was being watched by her older sister and her older sister's best friend. They say she wasn't feeling well, but she wanted to go get some ice cream. She stays in the car because she falls asleep on the way there. They get out, they go to get the ice cream. When they come back, all the doors are open and she is gone. This is the story that's happening, and nobody knows where she could be. We also learn that Dara, in some form or fashion, has gotten involved with this local club owner named Andre. He is the manager of this place called Beamer's, and we don't really know much about it, but there are a couple mentions in which Nick sees some pictures because Parker and Dara break up for a final time. Dara saying, nobody likes me, nobody loves me, I'm all alone. So Dara takes her phone and he's like, all these people, tell me, none of these people would be there for you. And she ends up seeing some pictures, and there's this a couple with this guy, and she's like, I mean, who is this guy? And Dara goes, oh, he's nobody, that's just Andre. We are introduced to Andre, and then over the course of the novel, we learn her involvement with him. He seems ominous, but at the same time, kind of harmless, because as far as we can tell, he's not a major player or anything. He's just kind of a background character that was in a couple of pictures. As Nick and Parker are working together at Fanland, this party at this location called The Drink is brought up. I don't remember if he brought it up to her, but in any case, it was kind of like he was inviting her to go, and she was like, oh, I don't really know if I want to go. We switch into Dara's perspective. Dara does end up going. She and Parker have a little communication. The cops come and raid. Dara is almost caught, but she's able to escape out of her hoodie, which is actually Nick's hoodie, and get away. The problem is, the next day, this cop is able to track her down because of the sweater. We're in Nick's perspective, and this cop shows up, and they're like, we know you were there, and Nick is like, I was not there, and in her head, she's like, even though I'm mad at Dara, I'm gonna cover for her. So she admits, she's like, yeah, I was there. The one thing we also learn about Dara is, so she and Parker had broken up quite a few times. But this final time, she comes to the conclusion that it's because he likes somebody else. So this is now an undercurrent that we've got going on of who does he like. This, in some ways, drives some of her behaviors. It's not a huge thing though, but it is kind of an important detail. At work, however, there's this little performance that is put on for the kids to kind of explain the rules and regulations of the park. And the girl who usually plays the mermaid ends up not showing up and possibly never coming back, which she actually never comes back. And the rumor is that her parents discovered some naughty pictures of her online. Maybe she'd been involved in some maybe drug-related things. So she's out of there, but they need somebody to fill her role, and the only person who can fit into this mermaid costume is Nick. So now Nick becomes their mermaid, which it's only important because then there is a performance in which somebody's dog escapes. It bites another performer. Nick, in her haste to try to help, ends up tripping on her own tail, face planting, and then this just becomes a new shtick, and there's no way that she can get out of being the mermaid anymore. Meanwhile, Dara goes to dinner with her dad and her new stepmom. They're talking, and neither girl seems to have a great relationship with their dad. He seems to be super disengaged, and even this whole time at dinner, it seems like all he's doing is drinking and reading news articles on his phone. The stepmother is trying to engage with Dara, but then she says something about Dara working at Fanland, and Dara is like, wow, this woman can't even get me and my sister straight. On the way home, the dad suggests, because Dara's birthday is July 29th, so it's coming up, and this also coincides with the 75th anniversary of Fanland, when he is dropping her off, and Nick was supposed to be part of this dinner, and didn't show up for one reason or another. And of course, all these misses between the girls, they're just like, she's just shirking her responsibility. She just doesn't want to be here. She doesn't want to be here with me. The dad suggests that they all go to dinner at this restaurant called Sergei's, which is a place that holds meaning to them as a family. Back with Nick, Parker, after the party at the drink, Parker is a little cold towards her. Around this time, the ice is thawing and they're starting to make up. He admits to Nick that he was never in love with Dara. There is this running motif of a steamed up window and a face. We're unclear as to exactly who's involved. We know Dara is involved, Nick is involved, Parker is involved, but we don't know to what capacity. So after this, we jump back into Dara, and she's hanging out in the bathtub when someone knocks on the door, and the person at the door is Parker. He is intoxicated, and he just wants to talk. And so she suggests, hey, let's go talk in the car. And he's like, in the car? And she's like, yes, in the car. All of this we're just assuming is a reaction to the fact that she and Nick had been in a really bad car accident. So they're sitting in the car, and remember, he had just told Nick that he was never in love with Dara, but now they're in the car, and he's looking at her, and he's just like, yes, I'm in love with you. They start making out only for him to say Nick's name. This upsets Dara, who's like, you just called me by my sister's name. And he's like, what are you talking about? She gets upset. She storms away, and she's like, I don't want you to ever talk to me again. This then leads to a flashback from Nick, in which she's making out with her boyfriend Aaron. There's also something about the Founders Day ball. At this event, rumors started, because she disappeared, so rumors started that she and Aaron had done some things in a boiler room, which appears not to be true, because as they're making out, he's all excited that her mom, I guess, is going to be gone for the night. And he's like, hey, so that rumor about what we did in the boiler room, like, even though we didn't actually do anything, like, we can do that. I'm not against it. Nick, even though she admits that she does love him, she doesn't love him enough to go to where he wants to go. So she ends up breaking up with him. Right around this time, Parker shows up. And it gets even more awkward because there's tension between them for some reason. This is a moment where they both acknowledge that, yes, his getting involved with Dara did mess up their friendship. From here, we jump into Dara's birthday day. Dara's birthday day. I need to go to bed. Our next scene, it is July 29th. It is Dara's birthday. It is 75th anniversary of Fanland. The family is going to go to dinner, and then she is also going to be working at the park. So she's at the park, she's in her costume. I guess she gets overheated, she ends up fainting. One of her coworkers throws Nick, sorry, I was not using proper pronouns, and they throw Nick into a pool, and she is convinced that she sees Madeline Snow. It is not Madeline Snow. There's a lot of jumping around from this point, honestly. It was a little hard to keep up, especially since I was listening to it. But she goes from work to dinner. As she's going to dinner, she sees Dara getting on a bus. She's like, well, I guess Dara is not going to be coming to dinner. When she gets to the restaurant, her aunt is actually there. So it's her parents and her aunt. She says it straight up, Dara's not coming. She ends up in a fight with her parents, at which point she decides to leave. One thing I forgot to mention is she remembers absolutely nothing from the accident. But she goes searching for Dara. She ends up at her house. She goes to Dara's room, looks through some of Dara's things, and finds a business card for that bar, Beamer's, and it's got Andre's name on it. So she says, well, I guess I need to go to Beamer's. She dolls herself up to look like Dara. She gets there. They won't let her in because she's not 18. She's like, but look, I'm here to see Andre. Andre gave me this card. They let her in, and they take her to this back office, and then the woman there is like, oh, you're here for a waitressing job? Well, not that kind of waitressing. So now we're diving a little bit more into what Dara is into, which this is the thing that I thought was problematic because there were a lot of hints. They straight up say it's not actually waitressing because none of these girls who are waitressing are of age. The woman is like, Andre's busy. We're not actually even having any events at the moment. But Nick insists. She's like, I really just want to meet him. I need this job. So she's sent down to go find him, and overhears him arguing with a young woman. The young woman turns out to be, so Madeline Snow's older sister is Sarah. So this girl, Kennedy, turns out to be Sarah's best friend. And from what she overhears, Nick realizes that this story that Sarah and Kennedy had told about how Madeline disappeared is a lie. Somehow all of this is connected to Andre and Beamers and Dara. This was a scene that I had a little bit of issue with because, so Kennedy leaves. Andre approaches Nick, who's standing in the hallway. He's got the charm on and saying, oh, hey, what can I do for you? How can I help you? For me, the problem came in because I didn't understand why Nick had to act so weird, except that it makes for good storytelling because it creates drama. But I have found I really dislike characters without a plan. When we have scenarios where characters jump in feet first and they have no idea what they're gonna do. And this is that in scenario. Why, except that we needed to learn that, kind of get an idea that Dara was into something unhealthy, and that, hey, you know, this story about Madeline Snow is not true. But when he's talking to her and she's acting funny, all of a sudden, like, he seems to realize maybe something fishy is going on here. So he's like, oh, I know you, don't I? I recognize you. Instead of being a normal human being, she freaks out and just sprints out of there. Back in the parking lot, she encounters Kennedy again, and Kennedy says, I wasn't part of it. I didn't know what was gonna happen. Now Nick's wheels are turning and she's just like, maybe Dara is missing and having this very erratic behavior because she is involved with whatever happened that is also connected to Madeline. Not that she's involved with what happened to Madeline, but it's all connected. Like a smart girl, she goes to police. And when she's at the station, because she's like, I want to talk to the police because I think I have information that could be helpful with Madeline Snow, but also, like, I want them to help me find my sister because she's gone and I need to know where she is. And while she's waiting, she sees the detective looking at some pictures on his computer, and it's all of all these young women, these teenage girls in various state of undress on a red couch. While she had been going through Dara's things, she had found Dara's phone, and on this phone were pictures of Dara on this red couch. She's trying to give this information to the policeman, and then when she's finally talking about her sister and he's trying to get the information on who the sister is, as soon as she tells him who her sister is, he kind of clams up, gets a little suspicious, and then he leaves. She checks out his notepad and she realizes that he's gonna go call her parents. So she leaves. After she leaves, she runs into this reporter who she had encountered earlier. This reporter, through a convo with her, he's just like, you know what? Maybe Madeline disappeared because Madeline saw something she wasn't supposed to see regarding Andre and these girls on the red couch. And the reporter does say that the police have been trying to pin something on Andre, but they can never get anything of substance. Nick is just like, I'm gonna put two and two together. I'm gonna figure things out. She's driving, she calls Parker. Before she can tell Parker where she's going, as she's on the phone with him, she realizes she knows where the red couch is, because when she goes to the police station, she says, oh, I know where that red couch is, only to realize she doesn't actually know where the red couch is. Her assumption was it was at Beamer's, and then she was like, I never actually saw anything at Beamer's. If that could have been that room, that could have been that couch. While she's on the phone with Parker, she realizes that Beamer's falls underneath the headlight of a lighthouse, and she's like, that's where it is. But before she can tell him where she's going, her phone dies. We cut over to Dara, who is also at the lighthouse. And Dara is like, oh, I've been here before. I just can't remember how to get inside. She finally gets inside. It seems like it's pretty abandoned. These blackout parties had been suspended for a couple of months, and the hypothesis is he had been under investigation for something, and so he had to lie low. Whatever the case, this red couch has been moved. The whole setup, because there's like a lot of lights and things there, like almost a professional photo shoot, all that was still there, but the couch was gone. And for me, I didn't understand this part. Where'd the couch go? What was going on with Andre and the blackouts? I mean, the police had been trying to pin something on him, but was there something specific and something specific to this time period? I know this is here for the purpose of the story, but I needed a little bit more as to the why. As she's rooting around this room, she finds Madeline's bracelet. And then the next thing we know, Andre has found her. She runs out. She's running down the highway where she and Nick had gotten into the accident, because they had gone over an embankment. And she starts to hear and see sirens. She rounds the bend and discovers this cross. On this cross is a vigil, and it's a vigil to her. What in the heck? This is our spoiler here, guys. Everybody is calling Nick's name, and her instinct is to run, so she runs. We're just gonna dive into it. Dara died in the accident, and Nick has been kind of in a fugue state, like almost a disassociation from herself, and she has been herself as well as Dara this entire time. So all these moments, like when the stepmother mixed them up, when Parker, after telling Nick that he was never in love with Dara, but then shows up on their doorstep and tells Dara that he's in love with her and it's always been her, and that when he says Nick's name, he was actually talking to Nick. It's just so clever. There's no reason to think it's not Dara, but then when you sit back and you think about it, why Parker is acting so strange after the party at the drink, it's because he was talking to Nick. But then Nick had told him that she didn't feel like going. Then when the cop comes with the sweatshirt and she and the mother are like, why won't you admit you were there? Well, it's because it was Nick. It was Nick, not Dara. Or even when she had gone to dinner at Sergei's with her family, well, of course, her parents are going to react or overreact when she says that Dara's not coming, because of course Dara's not coming. Oh my gosh. One of the best aha moments I've ever had. While I hated that I remembered this twist, I really enjoyed seeing the storytelling and the craftsmanship as to how is Oliver pulling this off. Anywho, from this revelation moment, we jump into the flashback that explains what's going on with this image of the steamed up windows, what happened on the road that day. And this was something that I'm glad that I went back through the book to make my notes, because I did have some questions regarding timeline, because this book jumps back and forth in time a lot, and it's not necessarily clear because we get months but we don't get years. So I'm just like, where are we falling along in this timeline for these news articles? In this flashback, we are at the Founders Night. Parker and Nick have decided we're gonna skedaddle. They sneak into I think they're at the high school. They sneak into the pool house, and Parker has brought some alcohol, so they're sitting up there and they're drinking. This is after he and Dara have broken up. They have a defining moment that, well, maybe there's more between us than we wanted to admit. This is then So we open up with this party that the girls are at. Here, they've come home from the party. Nick finds Parker on the doorstep and he's like, we need to talk. We need to discuss what happened. They drive to his house only to start making out, and Dara discovers them. So this is that whole image we keep getting of people in a car and a face through the glass. So it turns out that Nick was the one in the car, not Dara. Dara gets so upset that she runs off and she goes and she boards a bus. Nick follows the bus. When Dara gets off, it's along this stretch of highway. She's finally able to convince Dara to get into the car. But, their combo's not going well because Dara keeps saying, it's not about Parker. If you want Parker, you can have Parker, totally over Parker. Right now, it's more the fact that you just can't let me have something for myself. She eventually tells Nick to pull over because I want to get out. And she has directed her kind of towards no man's land. But in my head, and this really could be it, definitely in my head, I'm thinking towards the lighthouse. Whatever the case, Dara opens the car door and Nick is like, I'm not gonna let her out because I know if I let her out, I'll lose her forever. So they struggle. Dara tries to grab the wheel. They overcorrect. They go through the barrier and Dara ends up dying. So now we are back in the present and Nick realizes she's not Dara. She's also like, Dara is here somewhere. Dara has just run off. I have to find Dara. She goes to Fanland and she's like, Dara is at that ride, the gateway. She goes there. Dara is not there, but you know who is? Madeline Snow. What happened here is basically that's kind of where your main storytelling ends and we jump into epilogue. What had happened was, yes, her parents left and she was underneath her sister's care. Her sister had planned on doing this blackout party. So she was like, well, I'm just going to bring her anyway. She can just sleep in the car. While they're there, the sister, and what we learned this little expose Sarah Snow had written. So it starts out where I meet him. He seems pretty cool and he's like, hey, come waitress for some gigs. Super easy. You just come, you serve drinks, you smile, you get paid a lot of money. That's really how it started out. But then I start noticing that all the girls here are teenagers, and even though you're supposed to be 18, he never verified that we were 18. We just assumed that he knew, but we all knew, but we didn't want to say anything. And so she was like, it was all pretty innocent until that one night in which he gave me something to drink. The next thing I know, I'm waking up and my sister is gone. And what Madeline had witnessed was him taking pictures of Sarah. This whole waitressing thing, it was the rich and powerful, or maybe not even the rich and powerful, men paying a lot of money to be around young women. Andre essentially taking inappropriate pictures of these girls and posting them on the website. So this is also where we're pulling Nick's old coworker from. I thought it was a little vague, considering that these antics are what propelled the subplot with Madeline Snow. I thought it could have been defined a little bit more. I don't know if the pictures of Dara on the red couch were consensual, because she seems to be out of control enough to just do what she wants to do because she knows how it would make Nick react. So it's kind of a lot of what she does has this ulterior motive. This whole waitressing thing I thought could have been stronger. This whole online website thing could have been stronger. Madeline Snow had been hiding out at the theme park this entire time. She had been staying in one of the cars of the unused ride, and it had been covered in a tarp so nobody knew she was there. And it felt like we had so many epilogue chapters. We have this little newspaper excerpt from Sarah Snow, And then we get emails from Nick's doctor because essentially Nick had not been home since the accident. Coming back to Somerville triggered something in her, and she began to disassociate and enter a fugue state in which she believed that she was Dara. She does not remember anything from these instances in which she inhabited the Dara persona. But in the aftermath of all of this, she goes and stays in a facility. She is unable to have contact with Parker, who we get a couple emails from him. We get some more doctor emails. And so now she's being released. Learns from her aunt that Parker is back in town. She gets a little salty because he never let her know he was back in town, only for her then to see that red ribbon tied around the old oak tree. So she goes to chat with him, and I thought this was super unfulfilling. Obviously, she's the one for him. The whole thing between them is what caused Dara to spin out of control, which not really, but yeah, catalyst. Like, Dara was on this path anyways. They have a convo, and Nick is not sure what she wants, which I think that's fine. Like, in terms of her mental health, she's probably not ready to be in a relationship with someone. But for the sake of a novel, I was let down because we have this slow burning romance with them, because we want them to be together. You know, we want her to admit her feelings. We want him to admit his feelings. And then when we finally learned that they kind of have admitted their feelings, we just didn't realize it was Nick. We leave off there. We pick up with it being the last day of Fanland, or like Fanland has closed, so everybody is picking up and putting things back together. For some reason, Nick's stepsister Avery is there. She's absolutely no help. Nick reveals to her the unknown status of her relationship with Parker. Like, they are best friends, they were best friends, they are something more, but they're not something right now. Like, they might not even be friends right now. Was highly unsatisfying for me. But at the end of the day, she has come to terms with things. She's at peace with her circumstances, what has happened with Dara, and she fully believes that Dara is in a better place, and, you know, everything's gonna be okay. Drop the like, drop the subscribe, drop the comment, and we'll see each other soon. Bye.